I'm Chris Bryant, CCIE number 12933, and I'd like to welcome you to the second half of our look at how and why to configure a frame relay switch in your Cisco Home Lab. Again, even if you're not working with a Cisco Home Lab right now, there's some excellent review here as far as frame relay and directly connected serial interfaces, and it's definitely something you want to consider in the future because it's never been more affordable or easier to get used Cisco routers and switches and put together your own home lab. There's nothing like working with the real thing when you're getting ready for certification exams and bigger and better things in the real world. So let's take a quick look, a quick review from the first video. And what we're doing is we're going to configure a single Cisco router to serve as our frame relay cloud, and we're going to do that by configuring it as a frame relay switch, or enabling its frame relay switching capabilities, I should say, because even though we're making it a frame switch, that doesn't mean it's the only thing the router can now do. And let's take a look at our physical setup. We discussed this in video 1, the kind of cables you'll need, what our connections are, so you might want to take a note or two here on the diagram before you proceed with the video. But now we're going to go to our Cisco router that I've configured as a frame relay switch. And we're going to start off by taking a look at its configuration. So I have already pre-configured it, but I've also left a little error somewhere for us to catch, because troubleshooting is certainly part of the job and it's part of getting ready for your exams as well. The first thing you've got to have is the frame relay switching command. You can't progress with anything else that we're looking at here until you put that command on the router. If you try to, and you go, say, to the interface and try to put on the commands we're going to look at here in a moment, you're going to get a message from the console almost immediately saying you've got to enable frame relay switching first. It's one thing I really like about Cisco equipment is that if you've left a command out, the router's generally going to say, hey, here's what you left out. Not always, but a lot of the time. Now you'll notice that I've got an Ethernet 0 and Serial 0 interface here, and I have IP addresses on those. That's just a reminder that if we have interfaces that we are not using in the frame switching config, we can still run routing protocols over them, and that's great for your home lab because you can take a router, let's say you get one that has 4 serial interfaces, and if you're using 3 of them for frame switching like I'm doing here, you still have a Serial 0 interface you can use, you've still got an Ethernet interface you can use, you may have other interfaces you can use. But again, it's just a reminder that when you configure frame relay switching on a Cisco router, you're not disabling routing in any way. Now, here's the crux of the configuration, if you will. Interface serial 1 has no IP address. You're not going to have an IP address on an interface that is actually performing frame switching. What you do have to have, as I'm sure you could guess, is encapsulation frame relay. We've got to put frame relay on it. And you'll see I put the no frame relay inverse ARP command really out of habit more than anything else. The clock rate 56,000 command is there because this is the DCE end of a DTE DCE connection. And as we know from our CCNA studies, you've got to have a clock rate supplied by the DCE end of the connection. That's important to remember for directly connected serial interfaces as well, because that's what we have here in our home lab. I've got the frame relay interface type DCE command there telling frame relay, hey, this is the DCE end. And the most important command is the frame relay route command. Now, the first time you configure a frame relay switch, this part can be a little tricky. But once you get used to it, it's really not difficult at all. You just have to follow along with the syntax. The command is frame relay route. Then you've got to supply the DELC, and that is the incoming DELC. Then the word interface, followed by the exit interface and the exit DELC. So let's bring the diagram back up one more time and we'll trace what I'm talking about there. Here we're saying on the frame relay switch, if data comes in on serial 1 on DELC 122, then we want to frame switch it out serial 2 on DELC 221. And that's exactly what we've got for the command. Frame relay route, incoming DELC, then the word interface, exit DELC. Now I've got a hub and spoke router configuration here today, so I've got 2 frame route statements on serial 1 and then only 1 on each serial 2 and 3, but the concept is the same. You're simply saying when data comes in on this interface that I'm configuring on this DELC, then I've got the word interface, and then I've got the exit interface, and I've got the exit DELC. So another thing with that, before we look at verifying your configuration, and really that's all there is to frame switching. It's very simple to configure, and the other thing is you don't have to remove that if you're running, let's say you're running a protocol on Ethernet 0 and serial 1. Remember, those are the 2 interfaces that we had left over. Well, let's say that I'm running OSPF on those. When I'm done with this lab, what I'll do is manually remove, say, the IP address from those interfaces, and I will take off, say, this route map. Let's say I'm configuring BGP and I don't need this anymore. I will not just do a write erase on the entire router and then reload it, because then what do I have to do? I have to put that frame relay switch config back in. If you choose to do a write erase on it, the best thing to do is just to copy this particular part of the configuration, the frame relay switching configuration. Just copy that to Notepad, and then when you bring the router back up out of setup mode and you're at the prompt, just put this right back, just paste it right back in. That's really the easy way to go. So let's take a look at verifying this, and the command for this is show frame route. It's another command you won't see in too many CCNA books. Show frame route. Now we've got active and inactive for status, and sometimes in your CCNA studies you get thrown a little curve because something that sounds good isn't good. Like EIGRP active routes, we have active routes and we have passive routes. And you would hear that and say, oh, I want my routes to be active, but you really don't. And if you haven't gotten to that yet, don't worry about it. We're not going to cover it here. But here we do want active. And the reason that I bring this particular topic up right now, first off, when you're working in a home lab, as I tell students, the best thing that can actually happen to you is for you to mess a lab up a little bit, because you're not really hurting anything. It's a home lab, and that's really how you learn, is by fixing a mistake. That obviously if you go to work and you introduce errors on purpose so you can fix them, you're not going to last very long. So don't do that. But what we've got here is a couple of inactive frame routes. And the reason I put this particular error in is that it's easy to get fixated on one device when you're troubleshooting. And here's a little troubleshooting tip for you. You can't do that. And it's really easy, especially if it's the first time that you put a frame route configuration on and you're working with it and you think you've got all your DELCs right and you run show frame routes like, hey, this isn't working. And you tend to concentrate your troubleshooting efforts on the frame switch. Well, the problem here is actually that we've got a down interface. And this is easy to do when you're in a home lab, and I'll bring that back down so you can see it. Serial 0 is administratively down. Well, we all know what that means. It's shut down. So what I will do is open it and then zip back over to the frame switch, and we'll see if we can actually see the DELCs come back and the mappings. You can see that the interface came back up physically, then the line protocol came up, and then the interfaces came up. So that's something else you have to look out for when we show frame route here. You can see that they're all active, and that is exactly what we want. If you would like a copy of this configuration, whether you're watching this on my website or you're watching it on YouTube, I'll have a link there in the description or on the same page that goes to a page on my website that actually contains this config, and plenty of people have just copied it from there and put it in their routers, and that's perfectly fine with me. And I just want to thank you for your time here taking a look at a frame relay switch config. I look forward to seeing you out at the website. I do have over 200 free Cisco certification tutorials and practice exams there for you. All kinds of good stuff, free daily questions on the blog. And that is going to do it for this video. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube thread for future video notifications. I'm Chris Bryant, CCIE number 12933, and I'll see you on the website.